I'm Neil Graham, and on the Lowdown 121, Harrison Withers gives us the skinny on the aftermath of Indian Motorcycle's Harley attack ads from a few months ago. It split the punters into two camps. One side praised Indians' guns-loaded America First agenda, while those who learned to tie their shoes in first grade, well, they gagged on the whole affair. According to Withers, both camps missed the story. Did Indian Motorcycle lose its mind, or is the plan executing on schedule? Well, here's a hint. The product isn't the motorcycle. The product is the company itself. We last spoke a while ago on the podcast about the Indian purchase by Carolwood when Polaris divested itself of the motorcycle company. And in July of this year, you wrote on your a piece you posted on LinkedIn, the best thing I've read about Indian, about this whole thing. And you wrote that everyone argued about the wrong thing. Those are your words.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that everyone was arguing, Indian, versus Harley, but what we
And we're
screwed up.
referring specifically to specifically to those sort of attack ads, the sort of mega style attack ads that Indian aimed at Harley Davidson.
Sure. And that's, what got everyone's attention. But really when you scratch the surface, we really should be talking about the survival of motorcycling. And whether or not either Indian or Harley are long-term viable. And is that really even the future of motorcycling?
Because you wrote that, basically split into two camps, which is those who, and it's sort of, it was sort of the attack ads that Indian had were sort of a summation of everything that gets everyone on the right riled up. It was kind of like, it was Harley's supposed DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, practices, which that YouTube guy, attacked Harley for. And so they kind of just piled on kind of a smorgasbord of things to make Harley look woke. And everybody, and I did the same thing. We all kind of chose our side and we saw it as a superficial thing, but it goes much deeper than that. And let's go into the next part of this, which is kind of, you talked about, the deal, the math of it. And what does the math of this sale say about the health of Indian?
So the math of this sale certainly says that Indian was an absolute drag on Polaris's earnings, whether or not they reported a sales loss. And it was something that Polaris almost desperately wanted to get out from under and get rid of, especially when you consider, what's happening in the recreational side-by-side market, where they are far more profitable than in the motorcycle market. And, in order for Polaris to continue to be healthy, it determined that it needed to be healthy without Indian.
Now, how do you come to that conclusion, the deal math? Because somebody could say, oh, well, that's just some old graybeard in Michigan. That's just he's angry at something and that's his opinion. But how did you come up with that?
I'm not angry about it or anything. It's
No, I
more,
know you're not, but I'm just saying,
yeah,
Harrison.
clear-headed about it because it Polaris is the minute that they sold, they reported to their stockholders a projected $50 million increase in earnings, or EBITDA as it's referred to in business, which means that it was costing them $50 million to continue to keep and operate above and beyond, whatever revenue Indian was generating.
Right.
And again, reporting that as a loss is something completely different, but you don't get to claim and, in SEC regulated filings, that kind of financial improvement unless it's true.
Right. So Indian, and here I thought it was interesting that Polaris didn't choose to sell its snowmobile division, which is, all snowmobile sales are down from what they once were in the when we actually used to get snow in the North. They
Sure.
chose to sell their motorcycle division, this legacy brand. So, I mean, for me, sort of really struck out that of all the things they're getting rid of, it's that.
Well, I mean, I think that, Polaris are, reasonably smart, business people, and they know their market and their buyer. And when you look at, the buyer of an Indian motorcycle, especially the lineup that they have right now, it's an older demographic. These folks, maybe have bought the last motorcycle that they're going to, buy in their lifetime, or maybe just have, one more. And, the numbers of their customers aren't getting younger. They're not getting, more diverse. They're, fishing from the same pond, and that pond is getting smaller by the day.
Given that that's the situation, that it's not a great time to make heritage heavyweight motorcycles, in this day and age, why did Carolwood buy it? What do you think that they saw in it?
Well, Carol Wood bought a brand, a very recognizable brand, that has heritage and history. Generally speaking, I can't say what Carolwood's exact intentions are. Private equity buys distressed assets, in order to repair or stand them up and then resell them at a profit, or take them public, and take the equity, out of the brand and either take a minority stake or exit the brand. This is a well-known American capitalist institution. Buy low and sell high.
Now, Carolwood has a sort of a history of and one thing that you wrote, which I never thought of because I am not a business person, but you wrote that Indian was not a standalone part of Polaris, rather it was integrated in every activity that they did. And Carolwood, which sounds like a Herculean task now that I think about it,
Mhm.
sort of had to extract, and that's everything from the parts and the dealer relationship and everything. They had to extract it out of an existing company. How much work is that to do?
Oh, that is a Herculean
R
amount of
Right.
work, right? When you consider, think about, your job, or any of your listeners listening today, think about your job. Think about, the people in HR, accounts payable, um, logistics, how the trucks get run. Polaris owns the trucks that delivers the motorcycles to the dealerships.
Yeah.
Um, so when you're part of a larger organization, the same truck is going to have, multiple brand products on it. When you split that company out, they've either got to go find their own trucks, their own drivers, you know, buy or create the software that dispatches the orders to dealers. So everything except the people who are designing and building, motorcycles, needs to be recreated from scratch. So all of the enablement functions, of the business, including the executive wing, need to be established. People need to be hired. Job descriptions need to be written. Work processes need to be defined, and some of that stuff they get a head start with as part of a purchase agreement. And, there are also in acquisitions like that, um, what they call TSAs or temporary service agreements, where they will have a fixed amount of time where they're allowed to use the resources or will continue to share the function or resource until such a time where um, there's an agreed ending point. And then after that time, it's like getting Cobra on your insurance.
Oh,
Price
I
of
see. Right.
you know, the price of it goes, astronomically, through the roof. But it's not like it's a clean cutoff that, India needs to do all this stuff, on day one. But it all needs to get done, and it all needs to get done, probably within, 12 to 18 months, depending on what the structure of the agreement is like.
Now, doing this, extracting Indian from within the web of Polaris, um, presumably that would make it far more appealing for a sale down the line. Any prospective purchaser, would they not look at this and think, "Oh, it's truly a standalone company"? Does that make it more valuable?
Oh, it makes it incredibly more valuable.
Right.
All the hard work has been done, at that point, and, whatever the sale price is above the buy price is how Carolwood is getting compensated for doing all of this work, setting up, all of these, corporate structures. Um, and, let's unveil the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room. Polaris, an American company, can't very well, in this political climate, sell an American legend brand to, say, a Chinese company.
Well, you touched on something which you wrote about, which I think is so important, which is that, um, Carolwood can sell it ultimately, can sell it to anyone. They can sell it to the Chinese, to the Indians. Um, that's Indians from India,
Ironically.
ironically. Oh, wouldn't that be beautiful? But we'll talk about that in a second. But Polaris can't do that, can they? Because in this certain, with a certain political, as you say, there's certain political climate, to dump Indian, this iconic American brand, they keep telling us, only they say it in a Midwestern, iconic kind of accent. But they can't sell that to overseas. They'd be set on fire by good old American side-by-side buyers, would they not?
Well, yeah, and it's not just, the political climate, of, would, the SEC or, anti-monopoly or, business regulatory affairs even approve of that sale, from a major, company the size of, Polaris, but also the customers. It's just, what do you mean?
Now that a few months have passed since the sale, and since this, rather contentious marketing campaign where they went after Harley, you wrote that the campaign timing now makes sense.
Mhm.
And you wrote that, new products take 5 years to develop, but in 5 months, you can do a lot of swinging of the hammer with a social media or a marketing initiative. So
Sure.
so take me through that. What are they up to? What were they trying to do? What are they trying to do?
Um,
They spent $25 million apparently on this.
well, that's their entire digital budget, for a year,
Right.
as reported by one source. We don't know that that was all spent on this campaign or with noise media or, anything of that nature. But the idea is to kick the hornet's nest,
Mm.
and, see what comes out of it, basically, and, create a splash. And, maybe capitalize on, some of, again, Harley and Indian are fishing from this same pool that's shrinking. If you can take a bigger share of that, pool by, leveraging some, emotional baggage, um, I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying that, it could work. Now, it didn't work.
Now now
Uh,
now that's interesting. You say it didn't work. Now, because most of what happened with noise media, which has ties to Trump,
Yeah.
and t- and
Well,
and
Brad Parscale.
yeah, Trump operative, former Trump operative. So most of it took place below, sort of below the waterline, didn't it? I mean, they would, they would sort of, there was a subversiveness to kind of this, where they would weigh in on chat rooms and forums and stuff like that. That's my understanding. And
That
then it went above board with a very specific social media attack ad.
Yeah, that certainly happened in a net, effect, that it seemed like, a very coordinated thing, between, noise media and, um, conservative pundits and, monitoring, chat boards and social media for these, woke, kinds of messages. Um,
But it's almost kind of third party, isn't it? They're getting other people. They're not saying it themselves. They are sort of having others who are at arm's length
yeah.
say it.
So the more and more I think about this and the more and more I revisit this is the conservative pundits and the stuff that happened with, these guys in this seemingly coordinated attack, that would be just ridiculous for Carolwood to want that. Um, it goes too far. It's too divisive. It's reputation damaging. Um, and the more and more I think about it, the more and more I think they started a ball down a hill and it picked up momentum and, got bigger on the way down. Um,
Well,
I
because
think it got away
because
from them.
because what there was really only one that I saw. There's really only been one really public post about it. There was that attack ad, and then they had a
Mhm.
follow up thing that said, uh, the irony in this is delicious. You could cut it into
Ye
12 pieces and serve it with coffee. Nice cortado. Which is that they said that, Harley Davidson went political when really Indians thing is so overtly political. But
Yeah.
anyway, um, in doing this, they came back and they said, well, we're not backing down. But then they didn't follow up, did they? It just sort of
Huh.
stopped. They wouldn't talk about it. They wouldn't, and it was just, and that's been the end of it. And then there's been sort of radio silence from
Yeah, yeah,
Carolwood/Indian.
and to give you, and honestly, Harley Davidson gave them permission to do that.
What do you mean by that?
Harley Davidson went silent. They didn't respond to it,
What do you think of
right?
that what do you think of that as an approach?
It was brilliant. It was exactly what they should have done, and
So it's
I'm
like
sure
it's like
they
trying to
got,
have an argument with yourself.
good advice. But,
Right.
I mean, again, let's look at this, for reality's sake. Um, Indian doesn't sell 25% of what Harley Davidson sells. How many of these, how much of that pool are they going to steal with this rhetoric?
Well,
And
this
I think that they've determined it's wasn't worth worrying about.
do you think that they were hoodwinked into doing something like this? I mean, I don't know Mike Kennedy, but my God, who's the
Oh,
president
I
of this, the
I
CEO
don't
of India? But I mean,
yeah.
what was the net gain from this? Because it just
Well, there was no net gain.
right.
I
But
mean,
who thought it was going to work? Kennedy,
well, it's hard to say. It's hard to
right,
say whether it was Kennedy or whether it was Carolwood.
right.
Um, you know, Kennedy, spent 24 years at Harley Davidson. I'm sure many people who he still considers friends, worked there.
What I find so odd about this, the whole Mike Kennedy thing, and not to pick on him, I'm sure he's a fine human. Maybe not. Anyway, the thing that I find so perplexing is that we the enthusiasts, seem so easily hoodwinked. Every time I see a post, it's like, Mike Kennedy rode a motorcycle to the dealership. It's like he's like the first executive to ever ride a motorcycle. It's like, are we really that stupid that we get so excited just because somebody rode a bike to the dealership? And I almost expect like a chorus line of mechanics to come out of the back room, like high kicking, saying, singing like a Mike Kennedy song or something, like the Pirates of Penzance, or and then circling around him in the parking lot, and I don't know, they do a little musical number like the Shriners. I mean, really, are we that superficial?
Yes, we are. We are. And
Thank God.
you know, uh and it's not just motorcycles. I mean, look at Jim Farley at Ford and the fact that he actually, races. And all sorts of, Ford enthusiasts, are that much more, excited about Ford
Right,
because, their chairman will actually, get behind the wheel of a race car and not only drive, but, drive well.
right.
Um, so yeah, I mean, the thing is that as human beings, we're like pre-programmed to want to relate to other human beings. And the fact that he swings his leg over a two-wheel, piece of machinery the same way as the rest of us do, matters to people. It makes them feel like, more aligned, with that brand and certainly more aligned with, the leadership of that brand. In the same breath, how many of these stories have, criticized Carolwood because they're not motorcyclists?
The Lowdown Radio Show is presented by advrider.com. Become a site supporter and receive our biannual magazine. advrider.com. Where do you think this is ultimately going to go? I mean, it presumably it's going to be, Indian will be offered for sale. And if you look around at various sales, like, the power of Indian manufacturing right now,
Mhm,
and it hasn't hurt legacy brands. I mean, Norton Motorcycles is kind of making a comeback, but the big ones, of course, are, Jaguar Land Rover. And where I live, there's lots of money. I don't have any of it, of course, but, and the Land Rover and Range Rover thing is still going strong, and I don't think there's anyone at all, even if they know they don't care anymore, that it's
mhm.
not owned by a mossy English, consortium. So, I mean, would anyone care? Is it different? Is it different with motorcycles? Would anyone care if Indian was ultimately Indian?
Sure, the people who are swimming in that little shrinking pond.
And the shrinking pond is ultimately the problem.
Yeah, and, yeah, there's, however many 100,000 of those people. It's not probably not millions, um, that really care any more than, you didn't buy your last automobile because too many of its parts, came from China.
Right. I mean, it's an interesting story to me because Indian is really, and this seems like kind of a suicidal march to me from everything I've been able to glean from regular contributors like Michael Ularic and yourself and others,
Mhm,
which is that, an Indian, the Sturgis motorcycle cosplay event is currently going on. Um, And Indian, just announced another heritage chief model, it's paint and, $4,000. I mean, let's face it, Ducati does this. They put sticker kits on their super bikes and double the price, and I think it's very clever of them to do it, but those are sort of modern motorcycles. I mean, the idea that they're just doubling down on what is a shrinking and shrinking market. I mean, how does this ultimately increase brand value? Because that's what Carol Wood wants to do, obviously. Ooh, there's thunder. That's Carolwood. They're coming for me. They yeah. Who didn't say that
Um,
private equity couldn't influence the weather? So they're trying to increase value, but so far everything I've seen from the marketing, the attack ads to sort of doubling down on that whole thing, and then the lineup where they said, where Mike Kennedy has said, "We're not going for small motorcycles." They discontinued the FTR line, which was sort of their Indians sort of, swing at modernity.
mhm.
And the trikes and heavyweight cruisers, which is the exact part of the market that's shrinking. So, can you see anything in here that makes any sense to you?
Well, first of all, the Sturgis special edition, is a page out of, um, the car manufacturer's, book. And it's, a special edition. It used to be the, you remember the Indy pace cars,
Oh, yeah, the Corvette
the
Indy pace cars,
Corvettes and,
Camaros, and
and
yeah, yeah.
Camaros and, limited edition. And, the truth of the matter is the people who buy, these limited editions already have a bike that's probably almost identical that is, about 2 years old sitting in their garage. Um, and it's just about turning over that inventory, and keeping the incremental sales,
Well,
rolling.
but
Um,
I understand that, but then, but General Motors, who might be making the pace car, is also making transit vans and, and long haul trucks and, and economy cars and,
mhm.
you know, where Indian, this is like that's what they got. That's all they got.
Well, yeah, and I mean, here's the deal is that is going to be a critical thing when they go to sell this company because anybody who comes in is gonna say, "Well, what's your product pipeline?" And, "What is it that you've been working on?" Because it takes, 4 years to get a motorcycle from, concept um, to, the sales room floor, and, when that day comes, it's pretty risky to not, have anything. Um, but at the same time, one of the most valuable brands on earth right now is, Jeep. And, it's having a Wrangler or, having the next Defender. So it's not unheard of that, the Scout and the Chief, become, monolithic. Um, but the problem that I have with that strategy is that's not bringing anybody new to the brand. That's, bringing people who are already engaged with the Scout and Chief, models, and giving them, something else to buy. I can't see a world where, dismissing, um, the lightweight and midweight market makes sense not only for any given brand, but also for motorcycling, in general. Um, you're ignoring the only path that you have to grow somebody, into your heavyweight brand. So you're pretty much changing the story here where you're going to say, to, motorcyclists or, aspiring motorcyclists, we want you to buy a motorcycle from somebody else.
What should we look for in the next little while with Indian as presumably and over the next 2 or 3 years? Um, what are some of the things that you'll be keeping an eye out for?
Product pipeline. Again, like what is it that is not a variation on the Scout and the Chief? Um, what is going to reach, new and, different markets? Harley is certainly recognizing the strength of new and different markets outside the US and seemingly, developing some, lighter weight motorcycles, internally. Um, And for them to ignore that market, I think is, short-sighted. So, I'd be looking for them to, reverse course on that or have the sales cycle be shorter than anyone expects.
So, in other words, if we don't see anything new, expect this to be a quick flip.
I would think so, yeah.
Harrison, thank you so much for this. And where can we? I can't encourage people enough to read more of your stuff. It's on LinkedIn. How do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, so, LinkedIn, Harrison Withers. There are no other Harrison Withers on LinkedIn that I'm aware of. Maybe there are, but, look for the beard.
Look for the beard, exactly.
I'm also on Substack, and I have a couple different publications, on Substack. But if you look for Harrison Withers on Substack, you'll find me there as well. I write a column called Electrified EV, that's specifically about electrified products, which motorcycles sometimes make a guest appearance in. And then I have a pretty personal memoir project that's on Substack, um, about losing a child, and there's also a column called the Capability Operating System, where I talk about business and employee development topics.
From the great state of Michigan, Harrison, thank you so much again for joining me.
Thank you, Neil.
As always, thank you again for listening to the Lowdown Radio Show, which is presented by advrider.com.